Hello, YouTube. So, what happens when you take an originally very gory, adult, and dark comic book and then decide to make it a comedy, make it for more of a kid audience, and have Jim Carrey in the starring role? You surprisingly get a pretty good movie. This is The Mask. Let's go into it. So, the film centers around Stanley Hipkiss, a sort of hopeless romantic who's also kind of repressed, even though they never make that apparent. But apparently, Stanley Ipkiss thinks that he's repressed for some reason, and pretty much he works at a bank. This plays a part later. So, yeah, all that sort of changes one night when he finds a mask in a lake after mistaking that for a body. I still to this day don't really get how he mistakes a pile of trash with a mask on it for a body in the lake. I really never got this. I mean, okay, you could make the argument that maybe it's just because it was dark out and everything, and he just sort of saw something in the lake that sort of remotely looks like a body, but it still doesn't even look like the shape of a body all that much. When you look at it, it doesn't look like that. It just sort of looks like a shape, like a miscellaneous shape, and yet he somehow mistakes this for a body. I have no idea how he does that. But he gets out the mask and pretty much decides, well, apparently since I'm a hoarder, yeah, he has a lot of stuff in his room, so I'm just going to make the assumption that he is kind of a hoarder. He decides, well, I'm going to take this mask home to do nothing with it. Okay. And pretty much, after he sees a commercial for Ben Stein's new book about masks, okay, then he decides to impersonate Ben Stein in front of the mirror. I really don't get that. Why did he do that? He doesn't even do a good Ben Stein impersonation. I mean, he puts in way too much energy to actually act like Ben Stein. So pretty much, after that, he decides, well, since I just made fun of a commercial for a book about masks, I guess I'll just put on the mask because I got nothing else to do tonight. So he puts on the mask and immediately becomes a cartoon character. It, the weird thing is, though, that the mask seems to have this effect with a lot of people who put on the mask. Even Damien, who puts on the mask later, he seems to have the sort of same effect. Like, he's shot with bullets and then he just spits the bullets out. And yeah, that really does look like a cartoon moment there, so does the mask just grant anyone cartoon abilities? I don't know. Apparently it does. So he puts on the mask and decides, well, since I now have the powers of a cartoon character, the best thing to do is go annoy my landlord, mess with some muggers in the streets, and go get revenge on these mechanics that kind of ripped me off. The obvious thing to do. So yeah, that's exactly what he does, and pretty much he just thinks it's all a dream because he just woke up in bed the next morning with the mask right next to him. Clearly, he just so he just clearly thought that he just went right to bed after putting on the mask and just sort of left the mask on the side of the bed, I guess. And pretty much he realizes that he's late for work, so now this is the really important piece of this movie. But of course, then he starts to walk out the door and finds out that apparently it was all real, and he's kind of takes this all well. Just like, huh, it was all real. Okay, cool. So he throws the mask out because, yeah, actually, that's a pretty good decision. I mean, I wouldn't really want that thing around that much anymore. But he throws it out, but of course, like a boomerang, it comes back in right after he leaves. And the dog, that was terrified of the thing, never decided, oh, well, okay, I guess I'll just take this and throw it out the window too. No, he just decides, man, I guess I'll just cowered away from it for the whole day. And Stanley Hipkiss goes back to work, where he gets hassled about missing work for a day. But since his friend Charlie had a newspaper of one of his clients, that fixes everything. I don't know. I guess that fixed everything there. So then him and Charlie start to talk about stuff that doesn't really have any impact, and then he meets Peggy Brandt, who is a news reporter who pretty much is trying to follow up on the story of what happens to the mechanics. And seeing as Stanley Hipkiss had his car currently in there, she decides, well, he might be a lead. But of course, he acts like he doesn't even have a car. Is he even gonna wonder why she came there? I mean, she clearly came there because of the fact that he was a client. He could just say, no, I don't know anything about what happened last night. But nope, he just says, nope, I don't have a car. I never even went there. I'm not suspicious at all. I mean, really, he acts really suspicious, and somehow Peggy never notices this. But eventually she just gets into a conversation about how she printed one of his articles, and she gives him her phone number. That's pretty much her big point in this movie so far. So the next night, Stanley decides, well, okay, since I've now found out that one of my clients named Tina, who I think is hot, since I found out that she works at this one club, I'm going to try and get in there tonight. So he goes, gets the mask back on, and robs the bank. Our hero, everybody. So he robs the bank, thus interfering with one of Damien's plans. Yeah, it's about time for me to bring up Damien. Damien is this gangster who apparently has had enough with the guy who seems to be running everything in this town. So he's going out to try and get a lot more money so he can get rid of the other guy. And then sort of just be in charge of everything going on in this town. He can't just go to another town and do exactly what this other guy did. No, he has to take over this whole town because he really likes this town, I guess. And Tina apparently works with him. So, yeah, that's pretty much his big plot in this one. He also tried to rob the bank, and the mask beat him to it. And that's pretty much why he mainly becomes the main antagonist of this movie, because the mask beat him in robbing something. And also dance with Tina. Beats me. So, yeah, he goes off to meet with Tina, and then just sort of leaves after getting confronted by Damien, but it seems that he left a piece of evidence behind. His pajamas, which he wasn't wearing that same night. Yeah, and apparently this is a really big clue. For one of the cops, yeah, I forgot his name, wait a sec. Callaway. Yeah, one of the cops, Callaway. This apparently is a big giveaway to him because he saw this one guy wearing pajamas like this. So what, he thinks that he just robbed the bank in his pajamas? And he goes off to confront Stanley about it, but he denies everything. So that's the end of that, I guess. And pretty much Stanley does the same thing in trying to be a mask at night again. And he also comes back late, but he also goes back to work late again, but this time he actually confronts the guy who works there. Yeah, he blackmails his boss. This has gone great for him. And surprisingly, his boss never says anything about this, nor even has a part to play in the rest of the movie. He's the best at this job. So, pretty much, Stanley starts to talk to Charlie about how the Coco Boingo Club. Who named that club? Really, who named that thing? Who named it that silly of a name? I mean, come on, really. But apparently that is the club that Tina works for. I'm just gonna keep on calling it the club because that name is just so silly. Um, Pretty much, he finds out that there's going to be a big event going on that night, and anyone who's anyone will be there. So of course there are tons of people wanting to get in, but they don't get taken in. So yeah, really big event, but no one is allowed in really, unless if they know someone in there or they know the guy who works the ropes. So yeah, pretty much after that, Stanley goes and talks to Tina, who is pretty much just saying, I danced with the mask last night. Do you know him? Can I talk to him again? Yeah, okay, this is one thing I really don't get. The audience knows that Stanley's the mask, but no one else does. So, why is she asking Stanley about this? I mean, really, why would he know anything about this? I mean, yeah, we know he knows stuff about the mask, because, well, he's the one who uses it, but why would Tina think that he knows about it? In fact, Tina hardly ever sees him. Why would she just up and think, well, the guy that I meet with at the bank must know something about this? I mean, really, that's just kind of a random guess, which turned out to be correct. So, Stanley sets up a thing for him and Tina, and pretty much he goes and meets her for that, but it turns out that the cops are slowly getting on Ipkiss's trail. Yeah, it took them long enough. So, they finally do figure out that Stanley is the one who's apparently been the mask, even though he has cartoon logic which defies physics. And Stanley clearly never uses any of this, so yeah, it must be him, because the piece of his pajamas was there. So Stanley goes and meets up with Tina, but he doesn't think that's going well, so he decides, okay, I'll leave and become the mask. Where she can clearly see that I'm really the mask, but I didn't think this through that long, so I guess I'll be fine. And pretty much, Tina keeps on ignoring the mask because she wanted to meet the mask until she was having a good conversation with Stanley, in which case then she just wants to hang out with Stanley some more, make up your mind, and eventually the cops do come out, and Tina just bolts, and we get a pretty awesome moment where they are pretty much just trying to arrest the mask. He gets out, where he is now surrounded by tons of cops, and breaks into a musical number, which apparently takes down the whole entire police force. ECPD, you're not that good at your job. Because really, he just starts singing, and then all of a sudden, we can't arrest him. He puts on a good show. So he gets away. Peggy picks him up because she knew where he was, apparently. And then she starts talking to him about the mask because she saw him take it off. And now we find out that she apparently was going to double cross Hipkiss. And I gotta say, this is actually a pretty good twist. They do establish why she did this. It's because, well, working for the newspaper doesn't really pay that well anymore, which, yeah, makes sense. And pretty much, she just wants to get more money. And she thinks that if this is a good guy, she just like, nah, I need more money. So, yeah, I do think this twist is actually pretty well done. I just think that's kind of a letdown that this is her last scene in the movie. Yeah, after this scene, she's never seen nor has a point in the film ever again. She gets her money, and that's pretty much it. We find out that Dorian apparently wants to use the mask and was going to hurt Stanley. This makes Peggy upset about this for some reason. Why should she care? She already has her money. But pretty much, Ipkiss just says, I don't know, just put on the mask. That's all I know about how it works. So Damien puts on the mask and looks like a pretty big idiot, actually. I mean, really, the mask works more on Jim Carrey because he fits into more of a cartoony role. In fact, Jim Carrey kind of does already act like a cartoon character in half of his movies, so it already does seem pretty fitting that they would get him to play the mask. But when Damien puts it on, he just seems really silly. So, not not at all intimidating. Granted, he wasn't intimidating before he had the mask on, but now it's even less so. So, pretty much, he then decides, well, okay, let's get rid of Stanley by framing him, even though we already had a perfectly set way of killing him here. We just want him to come back in the end because he's the main character. So, when Stanley gets arrested, he talks with Tina, who apparently was going to just leave Edge City, and gets captured by Damien. Yeah, she's the best. So now we get to see Edge City at their best. Yeah, we get to see the cops of Edge City at their best by just ignoring Stanley and his really bad cry for help from the police. And they pretty much just ignore him by saying, yeah, no, you're saying that woman's being attacked, and, well, since you can hear her screaming outside, we can't for some reason. And then he just takes a nap. Yeah, again, he's the best. So, pretty much, it's up to Stanley to be able to stop Damien and save Tina, but how will he do this? By getting his dog. Of course. So, he gets his dog eventually. Damien plans on blowing up the club, and now his dog is apparently very obedient and gets the keys for him without the officer knowing somehow, and gets out and steals the officer's gun. Again, these cops are the best. So, Stanley just pretty much holds Callaway at gunpoint to get out of the police station, and this works kind of well, seeing as apparently the police here are idiots. So he gets out and now goes out to try and stop Damien, and succeeds in doing so. Yeah, that's pretty much the best way to sum up what happens in this fight, because there's a lot going on in this battle, but yeah, pretty much he beats Damien. That's about the gist of what happens. The mask wins, and him, Charlie, Tina, and his dog drive off, and Stanley gets rid of the mask because the mask was never useful to him, as Charlie and Milo go chase after it, and it ends up in a very, very poor sequel. So, I gotta say, I really do enjoy this movie. Now, the way they use the cartoon features for it, it works. This is one of the very first movies to use CGI as a cartoon element instead of just using it as an effect. And I think it really works. The CGI still does hold up pretty well, but it really does work. The way they're able to use it as only when he's the mask and whenever any other character is the mask, it works in their favor, and I think that overall the story's pretty good. Granted, some of the characters do seem kind of cliche, but I'll talk about that later. But it's more the way they execute how the characters work within the story, and also how the story works itself. Now, yeah, I know this movie was based off of a very dark and gritty comic book, in which Stanley Hipkiss actually dies pretty fast. But I still think that with what they did with it, it is pretty good. They do make it their own sort of story, and granted, they do make it more of a kid-friendly movie without Hipkiss even killing anyone. Yeah, the only guy that he technically kills is Damien, and that's kind of just due to Damien being an idiot. So, I do think that this movie is really good, and the storyline does work pretty well. Even though there are some aspects where, yeah, it does get kind of boring. Like, we already know how it's gonna play out. We already know that Ipkiss is gonna be the hero in the end and everything, but it's more what they do with it and the humor aspects to it, and also the way that they're able to tell a story that makes it more of an original feel. It doesn't really feel like you've seen this plot over and over again. It feels like you're seeing it for the first time, except in a different execution. So, for the story, I think I'm gonna give it a 7 out of 10. It's pretty good. I do like how they do it. The execution is great, and the way they use cartoon aspects is really well done. So let's get on to the characters. So when it comes down to the characters, we are of course going to start off with Stanley Hipkiss, who, like I said before, he literally describes his character in the movie. And again, I can't really tell if this is meta or just a way to describe how the mask works. Now, his character, as he describes him, is pretty much a hopeless romantic who's a bit repressed. I never saw the repressed part, but yeah, I can definitely see the hopeless romantic bit. And yeah, at times the hopeless romantic part does feel like that's pretty much all his character kind of is at some times. But I think it's more Jim Carrey's execution of the character that makes him more of a likable protagonist, and probably my favorite character in the movie. Um, Now when I was younger, I did enjoy him more as the Mask, but nowadays I enjoy him more as Stanley for some reason. You can also kind of see how the mask is affecting him during the day and everything, and that is also kind of a neat little thing to add to it. And I do like seeing that being put into his character as well. So for Stanley, he's pretty good. I do enjoy him. He's my favorite character in the movie, so yeah, there are some things I do like about him. So yeah, that's pretty much it for him. Then we have the mask, and man, does this character feel like he was just made for kids. I mean, really, this character really does feel like he was just made for the kids. Because when you get down to it, this movie is mainly about like this criminal organization thing, and then all of a sudden you have this cartoon character bursting in. I mean, it just kind of feels out of place at times. But with what they do with him, he is very funny. Um, Especially more if you're a kid though, but I do still kind of find myself laughing at some of his jokes sometimes. Um, Now he does. Now again, Jim Carrey does play the character pretty well. He pretty much fits this role great, though. Like, if they were ever going to remake this movie, I say let Jim Carrey playing it again, because I really do think that he could do it well. He plays the Mask just like how I think that the Mask should be played, or at least this version of the Mask. The more gritty one, maybe Bruce Campbell or something, but for this version of the mask, which is much more kid friendly and everything, I do think that he fits it perfectly. He does more embody the character and how he works. So I do like how he plays the character, but for the character itself, he didn't really have me laughing all that much. But I do still enjoy him. He is still kind of likable, and the way they use how he's a cartoon character, I do like how they do that. So there is that. So he's an alright character to me. Then we have Tina, who is the Jessica Rabbit of this movie. Yeah, really, that's her whole entire identity. She is Jessica Rabbit. And this movie also came out a little bit after Who Framed Roger Rabbit, so you could say they got a lot of inspiration from that. And that's pretty much her whole character. She is just Jessica Rabbit. But then again, I like Jessica Rabbit. She's a good character, so I don't really have a problem with her. There are some moments, sure, where she does kind of seem like she wasn't necessary, but in the end, I do think that she was done pretty well. The actress who plays her does pretty good, even though there are, again, some times where she just seems like an airhead. Yeah, she really does sort of seem like an idiot at times. But I mean, I don't hate her. She's all right. So then after her, we have Dorian, who he feels so unnecessary to me. Really, whenever I watch this movie, he always seems like such an unnecessary character. I mean, really, where was his point in this? Like, okay, I get he's the villain, but that's all he really is. That's his whole identity. His whole entire character is he's the villain who's also kind of a gangster who was cheated on. That is his whole character. And granted, it is kind of neat to see that type of stereotype get, like, a big amount of power and everything in the end. That was kind of a nice little twist to the character, but outside of that, he's not really that interesting, and I always just sort of felt like he wasn't really that necessary to the movie. Granted, I get they do need a main villain or something, but there are plenty of main villains from the comics they could have chosen. What about that guy who was pretty much an equal match for the mask? He appears in the cartoon, why not put him in this? I mean, really. He could have been a great villain for this movie, but instead, no, we need Dorian, the boring villain. And yeah, I just find him pretty boring in this. But at least he's alright, and the acting does kind of carry him, but there's nothing really that special about the acting that breaks him out of the mold or just makes him all that unique. So I always just found him kind of a boring character that I never really found myself that intimidated by. Like the guy that he's trying to overrun, he's more interesting and more intimidating than him. So yeah, I never really found myself that into the character of Dorian. Then after him, we have Peggy. And again, I already brought up, I do like her twist in the end. That is kind of nice to see. Like, her main point in the movie, you think, like, okay, she's gotta be the love interest or something, but no, in the end, she turns out being, like, one of the villains. And I just love that little twist. But outside of that, she's an alright character. You can understand her motivation and why she betrayed Stanley like that. It's just, she doesn't really have that big of a role to play outside of just getting Dorian the mask. And outside of that, she's alright. I mean, I do like her twist in the end. That was pretty funny to me. Like, in the end, she's just like, yeah, yeah, you're a great guy. No, you're not. Okay, thank God you guys are here. I couldn't think of any more cheesy lines to say. I'm just like, yeah, that was really funny. So, I do like her point in the movie. But, yeah, I just kind of feel like they could have done a little bit more with her. Maybe in the end have her actually play a role in the final battle, but outside of that, I'm fine with her. So then we have Callaway. And yeah, one interesting bit is that in the comics, he becomes the hero, yet here, he's a side character with a dumb wig. Really, what's with that wig? I never got that. That wig just always looks so fake. But yeah, he's an alright character. He does work more as a comic foil for the mask, and yeah, that's mainly where his character plays a bigger part in it, and luckily that's what they mainly do with him, so I do enjoy him. He's a fun character to watch. The way that he says Doyle all the time, that's just hilarious. I love that gag. Seriously, I will never get sick of that gag. I don't know what it is about that gag, I just really like it. So, yeah, he's an alright character. I do like following him sometimes. And they don't overplay him or anything, so it's alright. I enjoy him. So after him, we then have Charlie, who is another kind of cliche character. He's pretty much just the cool guy who hangs out with the loser for some reason and tries to set him up on dates for some reason. And that's pretty much it. Outside that, there's really nothing about his character, and yeah, okay, he is pretty funny. I will admit that. They do have some fun with that stereotype and making, like, oh yeah, he's the guy you would always think would get with the girl, but nope. One of the jokes of the movie is that he's, for some odd reason, really ignored by all the girls, and I do find that one kind of funny. I do like that cliche being poked fun at, but outside of that, he doesn't really have that much of an identity, but you kind of like the fact that he's sort of like that little sidekick who follows him around, and his ending scene is pretty funny. So I'll give him that. Then after him, we have the most important character, Doyle, who really is only really funny because of how you can say his name. Doyle. I really do love that bit. Just seriously, I can say that all day long. I would never get tired of it. Just the way that Callaway says Doyle. That's pretty much his whole entire joke, but it's still pretty funny to me. So, yeah, I like his character. Just all you can really say about him is Doyle. So, yeah, that's pretty much all you can say about him. And after him, we have Milo, who is a dog, and that is his whole identity. He is a dog. There's literally nothing else to this character outside the fact that he is a dog who puts on a mask. And I'll give him this, when he puts on the mask, it's pretty funny. And it is kind of a nice look at him, seeing him actually put on the mask and everything, so that's kind of neat. Besides that, there's nothing really to him, except for the fact that he's a dog. I don't know what else I would be expecting outside the fact that he's a dog. So, yeah, for the characters, I think I'm going to also give them a 7 out of 10. They're pretty enjoyable, and I don't find myself really hating any of them. It's just that some of them are kind of unnecessary, mainly Dorian. He feels very useless, but they're all pretty fine, and I don't end up hating them or anything, so yeah, they're okay. Nothing else really to add to that, just they're kind of okay. So, yeah, how do I feel about this movie overall? Well, I personally find it pretty fun. There are some aspects of it that are pretty cliched, and you can really tell where it's going from the get-go, but it's still pretty fun to see how they do it, and the execution of it is pretty well. The effects do still hold up very well, and for them trying to make it a cartoon in live action, I think they succeeded in that. So, yeah, if you're ever looking for a pretty fun movie that also has some jokes that are pretty good, even though not all of them hit the mark, but if you're looking for something that is pretty funny, then yeah, this one's definitely one of them. Jim Carrey plays it pretty well, and this is probably one of my favorite roles that he's done. So, for the movie overall, I'm gonna give it a 7.5 out of 10. There were some aspects of it that didn't really hit the mark, but I think that with what they did pretty well. So, yeah, that's pretty much it. Next week will be The Secret of Kells. Bye.